On the night of October 10th, alarms echoed along NATO's easternmost and most delicate frontier, jolting Europe awake. A sudden concentration of Russian military forces had appeared near Estonia's border, a formation too large to ignore. Russian troops advanced confidently into the Saatsi Butte, a peculiar geographic pocket that juts into Estonia like a blade, one of NATO's most precarious points. It was a signature Kremlin maneuver, bold and theatrical. Yet within mere hours, a terse, deliberate command from Tallinn transformed the situation entirely. Estonian border guards sealed the Saatse crossing. This wasn't simply a strip of asphalt being blocked. It was the closing of every escape route from the geopolitical gamble Putin had been playing for months. That strange, narrow stretch of land, once a loophole in the map, had suddenly become a flashpoint for the world. As Colonel Kaido Paduski, operations director of Estonia's Police and Border Guard Board, declared that night,
"We detected an abnormally high level of military activity across the border. The crossing is now closed indefinitely to prevent potential provocations or hybrid threats."
Behind this calm phrasing lay a serious warning. Satellite imagery and open-source intelligence soon confirmed the truth. Elements of Russia's 76th Air Assault Division had left their base in Pskov and massed at this vulnerable location. Russian tanks, armored carriers, and electronic warfare systems now stood just meters from NATO territory. It wasn't coincidence. It was precision. From the instant Russian engines roared to life, Estonia and its allies were watching. High above, NATO's RC-135 Rivet Joint Aircraft intercepted communications, while seismic monitors and covert border patrols relayed updates to Tallinn's crisis center. Estonia was ready. They had already shuttered the Narva crossing, only 100 kilometers from St. Petersburg, effectively sealing the northern route to Europe. To grasp Russia's western frontier, one must understand the psychology behind it. A mix of paranoia, steel, and concrete. The Narva and Saatse routes were both weapons in Moscow's hybrid arsenal, one overt, one hidden. Yet closing these gates stripped those weapons of their power, and worse, turned Kaliningrad, Russia's prized Baltic bastion, into a trap. This wasn't mere border management. It was the slow drowning of an empire. For years, Narva had been a lifeline. Economically, it linked St. Petersburg's industries with European markets, carrying billions in trade. Militarily, it was the invasion corridor, the path Russian armor would take to overrun Estonia in hours, distracting NATO from the south. That plan relied on opening the Suwalki Gap to connect with Kaliningrad. But when Narva shut down, that dream collapsed. If Narva's closure was a loud strategic punch, the sealing of Saatse was a silent knife, a fatal blow to Russia's covert playbook. This was the secret backdoor the Kremlin's GRU units, saboteurs, and little green men had used for years to infiltrate, spread chaos, and destabilize NATO states. Once that passage was blocked, Moscow's asymmetric advantage vanished. Covert infiltration, disinformation, sabotage, all gone. So, why act now? Why at 3 in the morning? The answer lay in a 2-month shadow war that began in August, when Belarus unleashed thousands of migrants toward Poland and Lithuania, a hybrid attack in the style of the Gerasimov Doctrine meant to sow panic and division. The strategy had 3 goals: overwhelm border defenses, split the EU politically, and test NATO's speed of reaction. But the Kremlin miscalculated. The West of 2025 was not the West of 2014. Instead of dithering, Poland responded instantly, closing major crossings with Belarus to all freight. In one day, Russia and China's vital Silk Road trade artery was cut. That move sent Moscow a message. Every hybrid assault would now come with an unbearable economic cost. When the Kremlin dismissed Poland's retaliation as bluff, Estonia struck next. Tallinn announced the indefinite closure of the Narva crossing, the main road from St. Petersburg to Europe. effectively strangling the supply chain to Kaliningrad. Poland hit from the south, Estonia from the north, and suddenly Russia's land bridge to Europe was gone. With logistics collapsing, Moscow fell back on its favorite tactic: intimidation. But this time, brute force backfired. The immediate casualty was Kaliningrad, once touted as a dagger in NATO's chest, now a burden chained to Moscow's neck. The closing of Narva and Satsa meant that Kaliningrad, already surrounded by NATO countries, became an isolated island that could only be supplied by air or sea. Yet with Sweden and Finland in NATO, the Baltic Sea had become a NATO lake. Supplying Kaliningrad by sea was now suicidal. Estonia's bold closure was the final lock in a chain that trapped Russia's western flank. The empire's stronghold had become a prison. The same fortress Moscow built to project power had turned into proof of weakness. This was not just defensive action, it was a strategic checkmate. In one calculated stroke, Estonia demonstrated that Russia's much-vaunted hybrid war doctrine and military posturing were smoke and mirrors. Kaliningrad, with its Iskander missiles, S-400 systems, and the Baltic Fleet, was now fenced in by EU law and NATO logistics. The cage was invisible, but absolute. This standoff, however, has roots that stretch back to 2007, when Estonia suffered one of the world's first massive cyber attacks, an assault traced to Russia that paralyzed banks, ministries, and communication systems. That trauma birthed a nation obsessed with defense and digital resilience. Since then, Estonia has become one of the most cyber-secure nations on Earth. The ghosts of 2007 explain today's steel nerves in Tallinn. Everything that happened, the lockdown at Narva, the air incursions, the buildup at Saatse, was part of the same pattern. Russia sought to frighten, isolate, and paralyze its neighbor. But this time, it met a nation bristling like a hedgehog. Behind the border closures, a vast hidden operation unfolded. Within minutes, Estonia rerouted all civilian traffic, transforming borderlands into potential battlefields. The army cleared the zone of non-combatants, preparing the terrain for defense, every field mapped, every trench marked. The border wasn't just shut, it was fortified. This readiness stems from Estonia's Hedgehog defense doctrine, a brutal strategy honed over a decade, built on Western arms and the memory of Soviet oppression. The doctrine isn't designed to win a war conventionally. Its goal is to make invasion unbearable. Any force that tries to swallow Estonia will bleed itself dry on its defenses. The Estonian Defense League, 90,000 strong, integrates seamlessly with the national army. It includes reservists, hunters, cybersecurity experts, and volunteers ready to fight at a moment's notice. With defense spending exceeding 3% of GDP, Estonia has armed itself with the very tools that decimated Russian armor in Ukraine. HIMARS rocket launchers, Blue Spear anti-ship missiles, and Polish Piorin manpads capable of downing helicopters and low-flying jets. Each is a spine on the Hedgehog's back. Moscow's generals had planned another familiar hybrid scenario: tension at the border, propaganda about protecting Russian speakers, and pressure on NATO to hesitate. It worked in Georgia, Crimea, and Donbass. But Estonia was not the same prey. Putin expected hesitation. Instead, he found precision. Tallinn saw his move hours ahead, deployed troops instantly, and stood under NATO's nuclear umbrella. What Putin mistook for a pawn was a fortress. He had cornered his own king. Estonia's closure of Saatse and Narva triggered a regional domino effect. Together with Poland and Lithuania, it locked every western exit Russia had. Moscow's trade and transport arteries were suddenly sealed by an iron curtain of EU regulations. The result was both economic paralysis and military entrapment. For the first time, it wasn't Russia dictating the pace, it was Europe. This was strategic paralysis. Yet Estonia's planning extended beyond military defense. Civil protection plans, meticulously drawn, were activated to safeguard over 400,000 civilians across the Baltic states. Every shelter was inventoried, every route mapped. Civilians would be evacuated not in chaos, but with purpose, leaving the battlefield clear for resistance fighters. The goal? Protect lives while enabling an organized national defense. This 60-day war of nerves that culminated on October 10th didn't just shake the Estonian border, it shattered the European security order itself. Two pressure points now define the new reality: the frozen Narva frontier and the sealed Satsa corridor. Together, they symbolize the end of Europe's post-war calm. But this time, Russia isn't facing a frightened neighbor. Across the border stands a nation of 1.3 million, small, defiant, and bristling with weapons, ready to turn every forest into a trap and every street into a graveyard for invaders. So, what do you think? Has Estonia changed the balance of power in Europe forever? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more updates from our channel.